I had always prided myself on being a patient and forgiving man. Life wasn't always easy, but I knew how to roll with the punches. The first time I suspected something wasn't quite right, it was subtle, just a feeling, like a draft creeping through a crack in the window. My wife, Emma, had started to change. She became distant, her smiles more forced than genuine, her eyes avoiding mine like she was hiding something. But I brushed it off. Marriage was hard, and maybe she was just going through a phase. But then, the odd things began to pile up. She'd leave her phone unlocked, the screen displaying strange names, names I didn't recognize. She would work late, staying out well past midnight. When I asked about it, she'd smile, say it was just work, and reassure me that I had nothing to worry about. I believed her, like a fool. One evening, everything changed. I came home early from a business trip, just in time to catch her in the act, literally. There she was, laughing, her hand intertwined with another man's. His eyes widened when he saw me, but Emma's reaction was something I'll never forget. She didn't seem surprised at all. It was like she knew this moment was coming. Her eyes flickered to me with a calm, almost bored expression. It was then I knew, this was the truth I had been avoiding. She was no longer the woman I married. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice steady, but inside I was spiraling. "This is Adam," she said, as though that was supposed to mean something. "We've been seeing each other for a while now." I stood there, feeling like the ground beneath me had disappeared. All those nights, all those moments I had questioned myself, they flooded my mind in a wave of clarity and anger. She had been lying to me for years. She'd manipulated me into believing in her words, her reassurances. She made me feel like I was the one imagining things when, in reality, she had been hiding a whole other life. I didn't yell. I didn't cause a scene. That's not who I am. I just looked at her, at the man beside her, and asked one final question: how long? 5 years, Emma said, her voice lacking any trace of guilt. 5 years. 5 years of betrayal, lies, and manipulation. The woman I had trusted, the woman I had loved, had been leading a double life behind my back. I left the room, needing to breathe, needing to collect myself. But there was no way back. There was no way I could ever look at her the same way again. This was no longer just a matter of cheating. It was a matter of my entire life being built on a lie. She had lied to me, yes, but she had also stolen something from me, my dignity, my peace, and, most of all, my respect. And that, I could never get back. I could have walked away then, filed for divorce, but something in me wanted more than just the end. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. I wanted her to understand the cost of her actions. I wouldn't just let her go. No, I would make sure she paid for every lie, every moment she had stolen from me. That's when I started planning. I would stage a silent divorce, one where I would seem like I had moved on. I would make it look like I had forgiven her, that I had found peace and closure. But underneath it all, I would orchestrate her downfall. Slowly, methodically, I would make sure her life unraveled piece by piece. Her friends would disappear. Her respect would vanish. The support system she had so carefully built over the years would crumble before her eyes. But I wasn't going to rush. I would play the long game. I would be patient. And when the time was right, when she had no idea what was happening, would make her regret every decision she had ever made. But first, I had to confront her. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The days that followed our confrontation were quiet, almost too quiet. I could feel the tension in the air whenever I walked into the house. Emma pretended nothing had changed, but I could see it in her eyes. She was watching me, waiting for my reaction, expecting anger, maybe a screaming match, but I gave her nothing. My silence was the loudest response I could give. I didn't file for divorce right away. I knew I needed to plan, to let things breathe. The truth was, I was in no rush. I had to make sure I could set everything up before I pulled the trigger. A silent divorce was about more than just a legal document, it was about creating an illusion, making her think she had won when, in reality, I was taking everything from her without lifting a finger. So, I started by removing myself from her world. I stopped engaging in the daily conversations that had once filled our home. Instead, I kept myself busy with work, making sure I was never home long enough to give her the chance to explain herself. When I did speak to her, it was polite, distant. I didn't yell or cry, I simply didn't care anymore. Every conversation felt like an exercise in emotional detachment. She tried, of course. She apologized, offered excuses, told me she was sorry for the affair, but it didn't mean anything. She promised that she loved me, that she would never do it again. But her words fell on deaf ears. Every apology was hollow. Every explanation was a lie. And that was exactly what I wanted. It was painful, watching her squirm, knowing that I could take her back if I wanted to, have her grovel at my feet, beg me for forgiveness, but I didn't. I held my ground, letting her drown in the discomfort of my indifference. Each day, she was forced to face the consequences of her own actions, the reality that I had stopped loving her, that I had stopped caring. That was punishment enough for me. Meanwhile, I began the process of slowly pulling away from her social circle. It started small, deleting old group chats, leaving parties early, and even distancing myself from her friends. I knew how much those people meant to her, how much she relied on their support. So, I quietly began to make myself scarce. When I did show up at gatherings, I acted like the man I was becoming, a man who no longer needed her approval or validation. One by one, her friends started noticing the changes. At first, they didn't say anything, but then the whispers started. They didn't know what was going on between us, but they knew something had shifted. Emma began losing her grip on them. She'd ask me what was wrong, try to talk about us in front of them, but I kept my answers short and distant. One afternoon, I ran into her best friend, Melissa, at the grocery store. She stopped me, as if she had been waiting for the right moment. "Are you two okay? Emma's been really worried. She says you're different." I didn't miss a beat. "I'm fine," I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Just moving on." I watched her expression shift. She didn't know what to say to that. She had never seen me so calm, so composed in the face of such a betrayal. It unnerved her. And that's when I knew I had made the right move. By the time the week ended, Emma had become isolated. Her friends were slowly pulling away, leaving her to question everything. She could feel the walls closing in on her, but she didn't know why. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a public blowout, it was just me, quietly slipping out of her life. And it was killing her. But this was just the beginning. I had bigger plans. I needed to destroy her sense of stability, her safety net. Her friends, her colleagues, even her family, they were all about to learn the truth, though I wouldn't be the one to tell them. No, this was going to be more subtle, more devastating. They were going to witness Emma unravel, and they wouldn't have the slightest idea why. She would lose everything, just as I had. The first step was to let her think she had control, that she could still win me back. And that was what hurt her most. She would try to fix things, try to bring me back into her life, but no matter what she did, she would always be one step behind, always chasing something she could never have again, my respect. I would let her think it was all working. I would let her believe that I was forgiving her, that I was softening, but in the background, I was setting the stage for her fall. And fall, she would. It started with a simple, seemingly innocuous decision. I stopped answering her calls when she left voicemails, stopped replying to her texts. At first, she sent me messages with apologies, asking if we could talk about things, about the affair, about the mess she had created. I let them pile up, unanswered. Then, after a few days, her frustration boiled over. She called me at work, and I could hear the desperation in her voice. "Grant, why are you doing this?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of confusion and anger. "Why are you shutting me out like this?" I didn't raise my voice, didn't get angry. "You've made your choices, Emma," I said calmly, every word measured. "You've made this all too easy. I don't need to be a part of it anymore." It wasn't the words themselves that cut her, it was the complete lack of emotion behind them. She was used to me being hurt, angry, even pleading, something that could still give her some sense of control. But my indifference? That threw her off completely. That was the first chink in her armor. Soon after, the calls from her friends started coming. They asked what was going on, why I was acting so distant. They were worried about her, told me she was crying, that she didn't know what to do. I let those calls go unanswered as well. They wanted me to step in, to do something, anything that would make it seem like I still cared. But I didn't care anymore. She had burned all those bridges long ago. Then came the more subtle attacks, the manipulation she was so good at. She'd start texting me about the kids, about things around the house. Small, seemingly harmless things that she knew would pull me in. But I knew what she was doing. It was all part of the act, part of the story she was trying to weave to make herself look like the victim. She wanted me to take the bait, to play into her narrative, but I held firm. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every time I ignored her, I felt a little more free. But I wasn't done. The friends she relied on? They had to go. Slowly, but surely, they started fading away. It wasn't because I told them to, it was because Emma had no idea how to maintain those relationships anymore. Without me there to balance out her story, the truth started leaking through. One of her closest friends, Karen, called me one night, and I could sense the frustration in her voice. "You need to talk to her, Grant," Karen said, her voice a bit too sharp. "She's falling apart. You're not helping by doing this silent treatment thing." I didn't hesitate. "Karen, I'm not the one who needs help. I'm just doing what's best for me now." Emma made her bed. "She can lie in it." There was a pause on the other end, then a sharp exhale. "I can't believe you're giving up on her like this." I let out a sigh, but it wasn't a sigh of regret, it was a sigh of release. "I'm not giving up, Karen. I'm just finally standing up for myself." Another silence. Karen never called again. I knew the isolation would get to Emma. I knew she relied on her friends for her validation, her self-worth. But when they stopped calling, when they stopped showing up, that was when the cracks would begin to show. And that was exactly what I wanted. She needed to feel the full weight of her actions. The final part of my plan was to make sure she lost the respect of everyone around her. That wasn't going to be easy, but I had time. I was patient. I'd been biding my time for years, and now it was time to let everything unfold. I started making small, strategic moves. I made sure to subtly plant the seed of doubt among her colleagues, feeding them stories of Emma's unprofessional behavior, her frequent absences, her inability to focus on work. Nothing malicious, just enough to make people question her integrity. I could see the changes, even if she didn't. At first, it was just whispers, but over time, those whispers began to grow louder. By the time her annual performance review came around, Emma was blindsided. Her manager called her in, but instead of the praise she had become accustomed to, she was hit with criticism. Her work had slipped, her relationships with colleagues had deteriorated, and her behavior in meetings had become erratic. They warned her, but it was clear to everyone in the room that her position was hanging by a thread. That evening, when she came home, I could see the strain on her face. The weight of her failure at work was etched in her features. She tried to hide it, but I could see it. She was unraveling. "Don't worry, Emma," I said, my voice quiet. "I'm sure you'll figure it out. You always do." She stared at me for a long moment before turning away, but I knew it stung. She had no idea how deep the web I was weaving had already gone. Her friends, her job, soon, even her family would start seeing the cracks. It was only a matter of time before everything she had built would crumble, and when it did, she would know exactly why. And as she laid in bed that night, I wondered if she would regret it, if she would ever feel what I had felt. The sting of betrayal, the loneliness, the helplessness. I knew she would, but only after it was far too late. The days after Emma's disastrous performance review were filled with tension, though she did her best to keep up appearances. She tried to act like everything was fine, plastering on a smile whenever she saw me, but I could see the cracks. Her eyes were tired, her movements slower, her laughter forced. She spent more time at home, and when she did go out, it was usually for work-related reasons, something that never seemed to actually happen. I knew she was spinning, trying to keep everything together, but I also knew that the more she fought it, the harder it would be to keep up the illusion. The silent divorce was in full swing now, but I hadn't forgotten about the deeper cuts I was planning for her. I was careful, calculated. I watched from the sidelines, letting her think that she had time to fix things, but that was the beauty of my plan, she was always a step behind. Her friends, those people she had relied on for support, for validation, were slowly slipping away. Not because I had forced them out, but because of the subtle pressure I had applied. It wasn't direct, but it was effective. The first to go was Sandra. She had been Emma's closest friend, the one person Emma would confide in about everything. But I saw Sandra's attitude shifting in subtle ways. One evening, I ran into Sandra at a bar. She was sitting alone, nursing a glass of wine, her eyes darting nervously around the room. I joined her, acting casual, making small talk. "So, how's Emma holding up?" I asked innocently, watching her every move. Sandra hesitated for a moment, then let out a sigh. "She's not herself anymore, Grant. I don't know what's going on with her, but I don't think I can keep pretending like everything's okay." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "She's been different lately," Sandra continued, her voice lower now, as though she didn't want anyone to overhear. "I don't know if it's the work stuff or something else, but it's like she's changed. She doesn't want to talk about it, and I can't help her if she won't open up." I leaned back, pretending to think about it. "She never was one for sharing, was she?" "No, but it's more than that," Sandra said. "She's become distant. I don't know if she's hiding something or what, but I just can't keep pretending like I don't notice." I nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. "I understand. Sometimes people just change. I'm sure she'll figure it out." Sandra's eyes flickered with doubt. She wasn't sure what to believe, but I saw the hesitation in her gaze. That hesitation was all I needed. The next day, Emma mentioned Sandra in passing, almost as though she was testing the waters. She asked me if I had heard from her lately. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her and said, "Sandra's a bit concerned. She doesn't think things are going well for you, and to be honest, I don't think she's the only one who feels that way." Emma's face tightened. She didn't say anything at first, but the look in her eyes said everything. Sandra was gone. Her best friend, the one she had relied on for so long, was slowly distancing herself from Emma. And it was just the beginning. Her colleagues began noticing, too. She wasn't as sharp in meetings, wasn't as engaged in discussions. Her professionalism had always been a point of pride for her, but now, it seemed to be slipping through her fingers. The whispers among her coworkers grew louder. They started asking why she wasn't pulling her weight, why she wasn't leading the team like she used to. I knew what was coming. It was just a matter of time before her manager would approach her again, this time with less patience, with less sympathy. The company had already started looking at her as expendable, and I was making sure they didn't miss any of her failures. One morning, I overheard Emma on the phone, talking to a friend she hadn't spoken to in years, someone I had never even met. Her voice was low, but I could hear the desperation in it. She was explaining how her life had started to fall apart, how everything was crumbling around her, but there was no one to help her pick up the pieces. I could feel her panic from the other room, and I knew it was only going to get worse. She was alone now. All of the people she had once relied on were either gone or fading away, and she was too blinded by her own pride and guilt to realize what was happening. The more she fought to hold on to her image, the more fragile it became. That night, she tried again. "Grant, can we talk? Please?" I looked at her, my eyes calm, unreadable. "About what?" "About us," she said, her voice trembling. "About everything. I know I've messed up, but I'm sorry. I don't know what to do anymore. I can't fix this on my own." I didn't flinch. I didn't get angry. I just shrugged, like it didn't matter. "I'm sure you'll figure it out." Her eyes filled with frustration. "That's it? You're just going to keep ignoring me?" "Emma," I said, my voice quiet, but firm. "I'm not ignoring you. I'm just done playing this game." She stared at me, her face flushed with confusion. "What do you mean? What game?" "The game you've been playing with me for years," I replied, my words deliberate. "The lies, the cheating, the manipulation. I'm done being your fool." She was silent for a moment, the weight of my words sinking in. Then she stood up, her hands shaking. "So, what now? You're just going to leave me? Is that it?" I met her gaze and said, "I don't need to leave, Emma. You've already left me. I'm just finally accepting it." The look in her eyes, her shock, her disbelief, was everything I had hoped for. She had no idea that everything she had built, everything she had relied on, was about to crumble around her. And I was going to be there, watching it happen. I could see the change in Emma now. It wasn't just her behavior at work or with her friends, it was in the way she carried herself, the way she looked at me. Her defiance had melted into desperation, but it was a desperation without direction. She no longer had a plan, no longer had the control she once wielded so easily. She was on the defensive, scrambling to keep her life from shattering. I could feel the weight of the situation settling around us like a storm cloud, but I remained steady. I wasn't about to give in, and I wasn't about to let her off the hook. Emma had been playing this game for years, using my love and forgiveness as a crutch to manipulate me into staying, into forgiving her again and again. It wasn't enough for her to feel bad, she needed to feel the consequences of her actions. And I would make sure she did. A week after our last conversation, Emma decided to make one last attempt. She came to me, her eyes red, her voice wavering. "Grant," she said, her tone pleading, "I don't know what else to do. I've ruined everything. I've hurt you, and I know that. I can't change the past, but I can try to fix the future. Please, let me make this right." I stood there, my arms crossed, watching her with a calmness I hadn't felt before. She had tried everything, apologizing, crying, begging, and it had all been for nothing. She was out of tricks, out of excuses. "You don't get it, Emma," I said quietly. "You can't fix this. You've had plenty of chances, and you've wasted them all. You can't just undo years of lies with a few tears." Her face fell, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something that almost looked like realization. But it didn't last long. She took a deep breath, then forced a smile. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I'm sorry. I'll change. I'll work for us." But her words were empty. I could see the cracks in her facade. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about control, and she was losing it. She had never truly understood what a real apology looked like, what real change felt like. She had only ever known how to manipulate me into giving her another chance. But I wasn't that man anymore. "I've been patient, Emma," I said, my voice steady, but carrying a finality she couldn't ignore. "I've given you so many chances to change, and every time, you've thrown them away. You don't get another one. Not from me." She staggered back as if the words physically struck her, her face contorting in disbelief. She had always been able to get away with it before, always been able to make me feel sorry for her, but now, I was immune to her manipulation. The power had shifted. For the next few days, I watched as she tried to regain some semblance of control. She started texting me more frequently, but I only responded when necessary. She asked me if we could go out for dinner, as if pretending things were normal would somehow fix everything. But I wasn't buying it. I was watching her slip away from me, and I knew exactly what I was doing. The real breakthrough came a few days later, when I went to our bank accounts and withdrew a significant portion of our savings. I didn't tell her about it, I didn't need to. I made the withdrawal and kept the money in a separate account. It was a small move, but it was another nail in the coffin of our marriage. I wasn't going to leave her destitute, but I knew this would make her feel the sting. She had always relied on money to smooth things over, always used it as a way to hold control over me. Now, she wouldn't have that power anymore. That night, she confronted me about the money. She'd noticed the account changes, and her face had gone pale when she saw what I had done. "Grant," she said, her voice low with panic, "why did you take that money? What's going on?" I looked at her with a calmness that felt like ice. "I'm done, Emma. This marriage is done. You've taken enough from me. You've lied, you've cheated, and now, you want to control me with money? Not anymore." She stood there, staring at me, her chest rising and falling as she tried to understand what was happening. "You can't just take everything away from me," she whispered. "I've lost you, I know that, but I didn't deserve this." Her words hit me like nothing, like they weren't even meant for me. It wasn't regret I saw in her eyes, it was panic, pure and raw. She had lost the power she had over me, and now she was floundering. "I'm not taking anything from you, Emma," I said, my voice hard. "I'm just taking back what you stole from me." And then I walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, her world crumbling around her. The following weeks were a blur of Emma's desperation and my cold indifference. She tried everything she could think of to regain control, to reverse the damage she had done, but it was too late. The walls I had carefully constructed around myself were impenetrable. I had started the process of severing ties, not just emotionally, but financially and socially, and each step I took was another crack in the foundation of her life. Her friends, who had once been a constant source of support, now found themselves avoiding her calls. Even the ones who had been her closest allies, the ones who had stood by her after each affair, each lie, couldn't ignore the changes in her anymore. The excuses didn't work, and neither did the apologies. Slowly, they stopped responding, and Emma's social circle shrank, each day pulling her further into isolation. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to tell them to leave her. I didn't have to send anyone away. They just disappeared. One by one, like sand slipping through her fingers. And she knew it was happening, but there was nothing she could do to stop it. I could see the panic in her eyes when she mentioned Karen's name, asking if I had seen her lately. I could hear the tremor in her voice when she said, "Emma from the office hasn't returned my texts. Maybe she's busy." I knew what she was doing. She was trying to find a way to hold on to something, anything, that could keep her from sinking deeper. But everything was slipping away from her, and she couldn't stop it. It was during one of these moments, after a particularly quiet dinner, that Emma finally confronted me again. She had tried to act like everything was fine, tried to keep up the illusion that nothing had changed, but I could tell it was eating away at her. The guilt, the frustration, it was all bubbling to the surface. She couldn't hide it anymore. "Grant," she said, her voice soft but shaking. "Please, just tell me what I can do. How can I fix this? How can I make it right? I didn't look at her. I couldn't look at her without seeing all the lies, all the manipulation. You can't fix this, I replied flatly. You can't make anything right, Emma. Not anymore. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time, I didn't flinch. I didn't soften. I just watched her, detached. You've had your chances, I continued, my voice steady, but carrying a weight she couldn't ignore. You had years to change. You chose not to. You chose this. She took a shaky breath, trying to hold it together, but I could see the cracks forming. I know I messed up. But I'm sorry, Grant. I really am. I finally met her eyes, my gaze cold, distant. Sorry isn't enough anymore. Sorry doesn't undo the years of deceit. Sorry doesn't fix a broken marriage. Her face fell, and for a moment, I saw the desperation in her eyes. She wanted to fix this so badly, wanted me to tell her it would all be okay, but I couldn't lie to her anymore. I couldn't make it better. I can't keep doing this, she whispered, her voice breaking. I can't keep trying if you're just going to keep pushing me away. I didn't answer her at first. I just looked at her. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when she finally realized that she had nothing left to manipulate, nothing left to work with. She wasn't going to get what she wanted this time. She wasn't going to win me back with empty promises and tearful apologies. I'm not pushing you away, Emma, I said, my voice low. I'm just letting you go. You did this. You made your choices. You pushed me away a long time ago. Now it's time for you to face the consequences. The words hit her like a physical blow, and I saw her shrink back, as though I had slapped her. She didn't speak after that. She just stood there, staring at me, her face a mask of shock and regret. But the truth was, I didn't feel pity for her. I didn't feel sorry. I had spent too many years being manipulated, being lied to, and I wasn't going to let her play that game anymore. This was the end. The final break. The point of no return. That night, after she went to bed, I took a few more steps to finalize my plan. I moved the remaining money into my private account, ensuring that she wouldn't have access to it. I sent out the divorce papers to my lawyer. I made sure everything was in place. But there was one last thing I had to do. I sent an anonymous email to her colleagues, the ones she still tried to impress. I didn't say much, just enough to make them question her integrity. A few well-placed rumors, a few whispers about her unprofessional behavior and erratic mood swings, and her reputation would be tarnished for good. She wouldn't know where it came from, but it wouldn't matter. The damage would be done. And as I hit send, I couldn't help but feel a strange satisfaction. I wasn't taking revenge, not in the way she expected. I was just letting things fall into place. Letting the consequences of her actions catch up to her. No more lies. No more excuses. Just the truth, slowly coming to light. The next few weeks unfolded like a slow-motion disaster. I could see Emma's world collapsing around her, piece by piece, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The rumors I had seeded among her colleagues began to spread, whispers turning into quiet gossip. She wasn't the star employee she had once been. At first, her manager tried to offer her some help, but as the stories mounted, it became clear that no amount of hard work or excuses could undo the damage. She was being scrutinized, quietly sidelined, and eventually, she was given the ultimatum: shape up or leave. I wasn't around to watch the exact moment she was told, but I knew. Her face, when she came home that evening, told me everything. It was the face of someone who had just been discarded, who had realized that the world she had built was crumbling under the weight of her own actions. The spark of determination was gone, replaced with an emptiness I hadn't seen before. I could almost taste her regret, bitter and thick in the air. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly one evening, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, her hands wringing together. "You don't have to make it worse." I didn't even look up. "I'm not making it worse, Emma. You're doing that yourself." She tried to plead with me again, a last-ditch effort to regain control. But I knew it was futile. She was losing everything: her job, her friends, her reputation. The walls were closing in, and she had nowhere to turn. Her friends had stopped reaching out, too. The final nail in the coffin came when Karen, the last of the women who had once stood by her, confronted her at the coffee shop where they had always met. I had no idea what was said, but I could guess. Karen had been one of her closest allies, but when she realized Emma's marriage was irreparably broken, that was it. She couldn't defend her anymore. That evening, Emma came home, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. "Karen won't talk to me anymore," Emma whispered, as if the words could make sense of everything. She says I don't deserve her friendship." "Maybe she's right," I said flatly, not giving her the sympathy she craved. "You don't deserve her loyalty." That was the harshest truth I could give her. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about her being punished, it was about the undeniable fact that she had pushed everyone away. The lies had caught up with her, and she was facing the consequences alone. The silence between us stretched out, and Emma sat there, her shoulders slumped, defeated. The woman who had once manipulated me into forgiving her time and time again, the woman who had been so confident in her control over me, now seemed like a shell of herself. She no longer had the energy to fight for anything. The people who had once been in her corner were gone, her career was slipping through her fingers, and the emotional support she had relied on was non-existent. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I had no more pity, no more empathy. She had ruined me for years, manipulating my love and my trust to get whatever she wanted. Now, she was paying the price for it, and I had no intention of helping her rebuild. This was her mess to clean up, not mine. "Grant," she said in a low, trembling voice. "Are you happy now?" I looked at her finally, locking eyes. There was no anger, no satisfaction, just an eerie calm. "I don't need to be happy, Emma. I just needed to stop being your fool." The truth of it was so simple, yet it felt so heavy. All this time, I had been playing the role of the victim, letting her manipulate me, letting her convince me that I was the one at fault. But no more. Now, I was the one holding the power, and she was the one who had to watch it slip through her fingers. Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't flinch. I didn't reach out to comfort her. She had used tears as a weapon for so long that they no longer had any effect on me. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't know how far I had gone until it was too late. "That's the thing, Emma," I said, my voice low, but clear. "You never knew. But you've known for a long time. You just didn't care enough to stop." Her face crumpled then, as if the full weight of what I was saying was finally hitting her. She had spent years believing she could manipulate her way out of anything, but now, she was staring down the reality of everything she had lost. She was alone, and it was her fault. "Please," she said, her voice barely audible. "Please, don't leave me like this." But I was already walking away. I had no more words for her. The emotional connection between us had died long ago, and there was nothing left for me to give. I was done. Completely done. That night, I finalized the divorce papers. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There were no shouts, no grand gestures. Just a cold, calculated decision. I signed the papers and sent them to my lawyer, telling him to proceed. It was done. The end of the marriage, the end of the emotional roller coaster, the end of everything she had taken from me. And when I woke up the next morning, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel joy. But I did feel something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Emma would be left to deal with the wreckage she had created, and I would finally have the chance to rebuild. But more importantly, I would never be her fool again. It didn't take long for Emma to figure out what was happening. The signs had been there all along, but she hadn't been paying attention. I had grown distant, emotionally checked out, and while she had tried to salvage something with desperate apologies, her world was already unraveling. The divorce papers arrived a week later, and when she saw them, I could see the shock in her face. The years of lies, the manipulation, all of it catching up to her in one cold, final blow. But there was no outburst, no begging or pleading this time. She had already done all of that. What remained was the quiet, painful realization that she had lost me, and everyone else, in the process. When she came to me that day, after reading the papers, there was nothing left for her to say. She stood in front of me, her face pale, her lips trembling, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of responding. The silent divorce was no longer about revenge, it was about watching her face the consequences of her actions. The silence between us spoke volumes. I didn't think you'd actually do it, she said, almost in disbelief. I thought we could fix this. I thought you'd give me one more chance. I didn't respond, just looked at her, letting her words hang in the air between us. I never wanted to hurt you, Grant. I never meant for it to get this far. Then why did you keep doing it? I asked, my voice cold but steady. She flinched, her eyes flickering with guilt. Because I was selfish. I thought I could keep everything. Keep you, keep them, keep my life the way I wanted it. I was wrong. I watched her, my heart feeling nothing. She had spent so many years manipulating me, playing on my emotions, making me feel like I was the one who needed to change, the one who was never good enough. But now, standing there in front of me, broken and defeated, I realized just how much of a fool I had been to let her have that power over me. But that was the past. Now, there was only the future. My future. And Emma's future, one that she would have to build alone. I couldn't help but notice how empty she looked. The woman who had once been so sure of herself, so confident in her ability to control the situation, was now staring at the floor, her shoulders hunched, no longer sure of anything. The last semblance of strength had drained from her, and all that remained was the hollow shell of someone who had taken too much and lost everything in return. I've already signed the papers, I said quietly. You'll get a copy from my lawyer. This marriage is over. She nodded slowly, but there was no relief in her eyes. No recognition of freedom. Just regret. The tears she had once used as a weapon were now a final display of her defeat. I didn't offer her any more words. There was no need. As I walked away, I knew I had won. I had given her everything, love, trust, forgiveness. And she had thrown it all away for a lie. But it wasn't just about winning, it was about making sure that she would never make the same mistake again. And I knew that, with the life she had left behind, she wouldn't be able to escape the consequences. Not now. Not ever. The weeks that followed were a blur. I finalized the divorce proceedings, made the necessary arrangements for the house, and began to reclaim my life. For the first time in years, I could breathe freely. I didn't hold any animosity toward Emma. I didn't need to. The damage she had done was already done. I didn't need to prove anything to her, or to anyone else. I had broken free from the prison she had built around me, and in the process, I had found something I thought I had lost forever, myself. As for Emma, she tried to salvage whatever was left. She reached out to her old friends, tried to regain her reputation at work, but the damage was already irreversible. People saw her for what she was now, a woman who had made her bed with lies and betrayal, and now had to lie in it. The whispers followed her wherever she went, and no amount of apologies could erase the truth. Eventually, she moved out of the house, leaving behind the remnants of a life that once seemed perfect. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't even feel anger. I just felt done. I had moved on. She hadn't. And that was the real tragedy. In the end, the only thing that mattered was that I was free. Free from the manipulation. Free from the lies. Free from the woman who had made me feel small, unworthy, and less than I was. And as I moved forward with my life, I found peace. Because some victories are won quietly, no shouting, no grand gestures, just a subtle, unstoppable unraveling, until the truth is the only thing left standing.